Hello to everyone. Jessica Barney here. Welcome back to the Barney Homestead. I am in my garden this morning. I am doing a pretty thorough look through this morning. It has been a while since I've been able to really kind of spend some time here. I was out of town last week for a work trip, Monday through Thursday, and then my husband and I were out of town Friday, Saturday, Sunday camping. So it's been a while since I've taken a really good look at the garden, and I figured I would bring you guys along with me, do a little bit of a garden tour and see what is happening. It is just about the end of September. It is September 27th when I am filming this, and we are in fall officially. Although I have to be honest, the temperatures don't really feel like that. It is supposed to be a high of, I think, 87 today, upper 70s tomorrow, 80s again for the next day or so. But then it looks like we cool off again after that. Hey, I'm not complaining. The longer the warm weather sticks around, the further out that first frost is. But it is a little bit confusing, and I definitely think it is affecting what is happening in some areas of the garden, because some fall crops just really thrive better in cooler weather. And so, some of them seem to be taking their time getting to maturity. But I'll show you all that as we go along. So I'm going to start in the front with these first two beds here. These are both 4x4 beds, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on. So in this bed right off the bat, I have two broccoli transplants that I waited a really long time to transplant. I wasn't sure if I was going to, but I have the space, so I decided to plug them in. They, I think, are still kind of getting acclimated to their new home. I have got a second succession of radish growing right here, and then I have all of my beets over on this side. You can see quite a few holes here, and you can kind of see these dark holes throughout the garden. I have been dealing with unusual pests this year. I think this is from squirrels and or skunks, because I've also found it in my lawn over here, and I just have holes everywhere. All right, so hopefully you can hear me okay. I have got some neighborhood dogs across the way that are having their morning coffee chat together. But as I was saying in this bed, not just here, but throughout the garden, I have been dealing with these holes that keep appearing in my garden. And from the research I've done, it sounds like it's either skunks or squirrels. So they don't eat the seed. They're obviously looking for grubs, which I do have a few in the garden, other insects, worms, things like that. But what they are doing is obviously disturbing some of the seedlings that are trying to grow. So I tried to re-sow some beets here. I did have a few pop up right here, but the ones here, just kind of got destroyed. So one of the things I wanted to mention, what I do for my beets generally is I do multi-sowing, which I saw from another YouTuber, Jessica Sowards at a Roots and Refuge farm, and she talked about how she had seen it from Charles Dowding. So that's kind of the chain and the research that I've done between the two of them. Basically, all it means is when you go to sow your seed, you are putting 2 to 3 seeds in each hole. And as the beets grow, like here's an example, there are 2 here, but as they form a bulb, they will naturally just start to kind of expand and push out from one another. I've had a lot of success with this because I have a smaller garden. It allows me to grow more food in a smaller area. So if you've never tried that method and want to research it, you can definitely look up multi-sowing. Charles Dowding is the one that talks about it quite a bit, and so there's tons of research out there for that. As I said, I've got my 2 broccolis there, doing pretty well since being transplanted. They are at least upright, so that's a good sign. And again, I've got my second sowing of radish here. I'm not quite sure of the variety. I've got quite a few, so I just plugged a bunch in, but these are doing really well. So first bed is looking pretty good, other than some seedlings that I lost to those animals that were just kind of uprooting the soil. Now coming over to this bed, this is my lettuce bed. So I have a row of arugula here, This is a row of salad blend. It's called Rocky Top Salad Blend. So you can see it's a mix of kind of green and red lettuces. I have a row of bok choy here, a row of, I never can pronounce the name of this one. It is like Merveille de Quartet. I think it's called 4-leaf lettuce. That's what it is in reference to, but it is this really delicious kind of red tipped lettuce. And then over here I have some little gem lettuce, which I am growing as leaf lettuce, not as head lettuce. So one of the things about, again, this bed, I direct sowed all of this except for the bok choy, which were transplants. I had 3 more here that I've since harvested and used, but all of the lettuce and arugula I planted from seed. And you can see up here, I've got some patches missing. It's really thin right here, nothing up here. And it is, again, because of these little animals that decided to just start digging up my garden like crazy this fall. So I definitely will still have enough here as it goes and grows to harvest for my husband and I, but it won't, you know, I have to be honest, aesthetically, it's not gonna look as pleasing as I was hoping it would. So I have never tried to start lettuce in seed trays and then transplant. Because lettuce grows so fast, I think I may actually try doing that and plugging in some of these areas that are missing. This bok choy is huge and definitely needs to be harvested, so this is on my list to use this week. This one got a little eaten up by some bugs, but it's still pretty usable. And then I'll have this whole row open. So I think I'm going to sow some more bok choy seeds as well. Just again, the weather looks amazing. It will continue to stay warm for a fairly good bit of time. So I should be able to get another round of these in. I haven't started them. I probably should have a while ago, just didn't get to it. But because of the weather, I think I'm in good shape. So that is my plan for this bed. But again, I'm happy with what I have. It just doesn't look the best. But again, arugula, I've started to harvest from this. The leaf lettuce, we should be able to start enjoying it in the next week. So all in all, not lost, but not the best. And you know, I will have some room for some succession sowing right here in the middle. So let's come over to this bed next. So in this pot, I just have some zinnia. This is, I'm trying to think of the name of it, Scabiosa zinnia. And it's just to add some beauty to the garden. Haven't been the best about trimming and pruning, but they get really tall. And this was the first one I planted this year that had this really pretty kind of buttercup yellow color. So I've really been enjoying these, and they just kind of keep the pollinators around. So next we'll come over to this bed, and this is a 4x8 bed. And what I have in here is my oregano that I grew from seed in the spring that is still thriving. I have a marigold. He looks pretty tiny, but when we get over to these other beds, I will show you that this gets so big. I actually have one that is literally flopped over on all sides that I'll show you in a little bit. I have 2 cabbages in here. There's one back here, a kale, and 2 spinach. And then here I have kohlrabi, rutabaga, and then my chives, which always live there. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at some of these things. All right, so the rutabaga is what I have been waiting all year for. I have heard amazing things about this vegetable. It is a root vegetable. It kind of looks like a beet, but bigger. This is the yellow Navone rutabaga variety. I have heard that you can boil this and mash it up, and it tastes very similar to potato, but a little bit sweeter. Really excited to try this. When this started to germinate, I mean, they stayed teeny tiny for a really, really long time. So I am really pleased with how these are starting to thrive. I did read, so I grow in zone 7B. I'm in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. As I was doing research, or what the seed packet says for these is to sow them in late summer for a fall harvest. They take about 90 days to grow to maturity. But then as I was doing some more research, it said that if you live in my climate that I'm in, you should actually sow in late winter, early spring for a summer harvest. So I probably wouldn't have, I think I put these in the ground like mid-August. I probably, had the weather not held out, had enough time to grow these to maturity, but I think with the way our weather's looking, I'm going to luck out, which is really exciting. And they are starting to kind of bulb up, which is even more exciting to see. They are kind of overtaking the kohlrabi here. The kohlrabi for me was a free seed that I got. I don't know that I'm a super big fan of it. I grew a couple earlier in the year. Don't know that it's one of my favorites. So it's definitely getting crowded out by the rutabaga leaves, and it is struggling, but honestly, I'm a little okay with it. I'm just kind of leaving it to see what happens. Maybe I'll get a few more, maybe I won't, but I'm not gonna lose sleep over it. So this is what it starts to look like as it grows. You can see I've got the root down here, and this will start to expand as it grows. That's what a rutabaga looks like. As I mentioned, I've got a cabbage here and a cabbage over here. Honestly, I probably don't have enough time for these to form heads either, but I started the seeds and figured why not take a try and see what happens. So the ones that are here are not under row cover like the couple that I have here, because I wanted to see how bad the pest pressure was this fall. This is the first year that I've grown a pretty substantial fall garden, so just kind of wanted to experiment. You can see these have gotten bit up quite a bit, I think by grasshoppers actually. I have not found any cabbage worms or eggs anywhere, so I don't think it's that. I actually think these little holes are from grasshoppers, which I am finding everywhere in the yard. So I will see if this ends up actually producing any sort of head for a cabbage. This oregano, I have just been so impressed by. It went to flower in the summer, and the pollinators loved it. And oh my gosh, the smell, the aroma, it's just everything. It is an amazing addition that I added to the garden. And just this carpet of green that it gives is beautiful. And then over here, I have 2 spinach transplants, which are doing okay. They are definitely getting munched on a little bit. Again, they're not under cover, but just kind of wanted to see what would happen. I was really expecting the kale to get eaten, but it has not. So this seems to be doing okay. Actually, no, it does look like they're eating kind of the little leaves in the middle. These are from this is getting eaten by, again, some grasshoppers. They make these tiny holes, and probably some rabbits that like to visit my garden. All right, so over here I have my covered bed of fall brassicas. So in the corner up here I have a bok choy, which also was a transplant that I just ran out of space in my other bed for, so he is growing over there. I have my thyme that I planted in the spring that continues to do amazing. I have a huge sage plant in the middle there, which I have cut back at least once, and it has grown back again to flourish. And then in the middle, this is kind of, really what I was hoping to grow a ton of. So I've got 2 cabbages here. Again, I'm not quite sure that I'm going to get heads out of them, but I figured I would put them in to see. I grew 2 huge cabbage heads in the spring and turned them into sauerkraut, which I have plenty of. So it won't be the end of the world if I don't get anything from them, but I just really wanted to kind of see what it looks like to grow under cover, since this is the first year that I'm using some frost fabric. In the middle here, I have my kale. Even though this is under cover, some of these leaves have been completely eaten. So I don't know if something has actually gotten under here or what it's coming from, but again, it's been under cover since it got planted. So I know that it's not cabbage moths or anything like that. I think it may again be grasshoppers that are getting in by just a few of the cracks that happen as a result of the frost fabric. And then along the back here, I had 4 spinach plants. I was really hoping to grow a huge abundance of spinach and kale this fall to freeze so that I could use it throughout the winter in soups, smoothies, things like that. But 2 of the spinach transplants did not make it. This one's looking pretty good. This one hasn't really made any progress in the last couple weeks. So again, because the weather seems to be holding out, I actually think I'm going to try direct sowing a few more spinach in this area. I'm confident I can direct sow here because it is covered, so I know that there won't be any rodents or anything getting into this area to uproot, because this hasn't had the same problems that the rest of the garden has had. So that's my plan, but these kales are looking really, really good. So I'm really excited. I should be able to start harvesting from these here in the next week or so to use fresh. So I'm really pleased with how this covered area is looking. And that would be my suggestion to you if you are, not just gardening for the first time, but have been gardening for the same way for a really long period of time. Try out different techniques and see what works. I started my spring bed earlier in the year under row covers, and it made a world of a difference. I probably should have put covers on all of my beds for this fall. However, I also wanted to learn what could withstand the pest pressure that still happens in the fall, rodent pressure, things like that. So for me, I'm doing a little bit of a test and learn this year. It means that some of my other areas aren't the best, but I am still getting food out of every area of my garden. And so that is what ultimately is really exciting for me, because that's why I do this, to grow food and to have food for my family and I. So I will continue to leave the fleece cover on top of this. It's a fairly light fleece cover. It is really just prevents a light frost, but I will leave that on the remainder of the season. So I think I'll be able to get an additional probably 2 to 4 weeks out of growing with that. You can definitely get thicker fleece or frost fabric to extend longer. I did not play around with insect netting this spring or summer. So insect netting is going to be, again, just that, a little bit more like net-like material as opposed to kind of a more solid cloth like that. And based on some of the bug damage I had this year, particularly with Japanese beetles, I think I am definitely, and I lost all of my beans this year. So green beans, pole beans, all of those lost to rodents. So I definitely think I'll be using some insect netting next year in my garden. And then finally over here, that's not under cover, but growing in this bed, is my parsley, which I need to harvest again. And I think I'm going to freeze it. So you can freeze parsley whole, and you will not be able to use it fresh, like toppings on, salads or casseroles, because it'll lose its consistency once it's frozen. But what I read it's really good for is if you freeze it, you can add it to stocks that you are making for flavor, because the flavor will still be there. It just won't have the same texture after being frozen. So that's my plan for that, is to just get a whole bunch frozen. And then here I have some snap peas, which have started to flower. So hopefully we'll have some peas in a little while. But this is also, quite a bit stunted and not really growing up this trellis. So not quite sure what's going on here. May get a few, probably not a ton, which is a little disappointing, but live and learn. That's what it's all about. Coming over to these last 2 beds, in this barrel pot, I again just have some flowers. So I have my candy cane zinnias. This one is a gorgeous pink, and this one is a little bit more of like a cream and coral color. Love these. The blooms are huge. You can see they're about the size of my palm, and they just bring so much beauty to the garden, and they are still continuing to thrive and will until we hit our first frost. We'll make our way over to this bed, and this bed is a little bit of a hodgepodge as well. So I have another marigold over here. This one you can see much larger than the one that we saw in that bed, but my biggest one is back here, so we'll see that one in a second. But this one is just amazing. The amount of blooms, this is one plant, I should say too, one plant here. The amount of blooms I get off of these marigolds is astounding. I mean, you can see them in here. They are just, there's a bloom here, here. I mean, they're just covered everywhere. I have cilantro right here. So this, I love cilantro. I add it to everything, smoothies, salads, sandwiches. I love the flavor. So I grow tons of this. It really isn't a cut and come again. So once you harvest, you're kind of done with it. So I do have some planted in another area, but I'm also thinking about growing some more because cilantro is super, super cold hardy and can take a frost very, very well. And then I have, quite frankly, a very sad carrot patch happening here. So that's here. And then I started some more seeds here. So I really struggle with carrots. I have really struggled with germination over the years. I've tried different methods. I've tried the board method. I've tried covering with fleece. The only time I have had very successful carrots is actually in the spring, and it was because I started this bed under cover, under row cover, and I had great germination because, again, the seeds for carrots are so tiny that you really have to surface sow, which means if you have anything moving through your beds, any type of animals, any type of wind, any type of anything like that, the seeds can be disturbed very easily. I find that putting them under that fleece cover blocks the wind and definitely prevents the rodents from, rooting up those seeds. So I had really great carrots in the spring. Why I didn't do it again this fall, your guess is as good as mine, but I was hoping that maybe I could figure something out on my own. These I did cover with fleece, not a hoop, but just laid on top until they germinated. But as they started to germinate, some rabbits came through, ate a couple tops off of some, and as a result of having no tops, you can't continue to grow, so they died back. I do have a few here that are looking pretty good, and then I have 4 rows here. They don't look terrible, but I did plant them really, really late. Again, carrots need about 90 days to reach maturity, and these were planted very late. I think I planted these, honestly, the beginning, maybe the second week of September. So I got pretty decent germination. They seem to be withholding the animal pressure, the pest pressure right now, but I don't know that they're going to grow to maturity. We'll have to kind of see how that plays out, or I'll have to kind of see how that plays out. But, again, live and learn. That's what I really wanted to make sure I had an opportunity to do this fall, was really experiment with a true fall garden. So when I say that my seeds were planted late, what I mean is based on when my estimated first frost is. So I live, again, in Zone 5B, northwest suburbs of Chicago, and my estimated first frost is October 15th. When I looked at the updated data for this year, it actually said October 29th, so I may get a few more weeks, but the first frost is when, again, your nighttime temperatures typically are going to hit that freezing level or frost level, which is about 37, 38 degrees. That will kill any of your summer crops that are not cold hardy. So when you are developing a planting schedule, what you need to keep in mind is your last frost and your first frost date. So your first frost, again, happens in the fall, and if you have a seed that says it needs 90 days to maturity and it can withhold a light frost, you want to make sure that that 90 days is happening at about the time of your first frost. So if my first frost is going to be about October 15th, let's say, and carrots need 90 days to maturity, that means you have to count back 90 days. So we would be September, August, July. So July 15th, plus carrots take anywhere from 7 to 21 days to germinate. So really the beginning of July is when I should have planted those seeds. So the first succession that you saw where they were a little bit bigger and bushier was when I sowed those. The second succession didn't get sown until the beginning of September. So as I said, carrots can withhold a light frost, but they definitely can't handle freezing temperatures because the harder and colder your soil gets, you know, your root vegetables, carrots that need to go down, it's tougher for them to grow. Also, the days get shorter in the fall, so you have less sunlight, so you really need to think about where your sun is in your garden throughout the season so that you can make the best planting decisions when you go to sow your seeds. So again, I may only get half developed carrots in that second succession that I've sown, but now that our first frost has been pushed back to the end of October and they can withhold a little bit of a frost, I may be able to get some growing through mid-November, especially if the temperatures continue to hold out. So that's what I'm hoping for. But again, if you're looking for more information on, again, how to determine when to plant things, you want to look at those frost dates, determine when your last frost is, when your first frost is. There's always a 1 to 2 week window on each end of those where it could happen earlier or happen later. And then you want to take your days to seed maturity and figure out from those points when you want to plant. And then germination is a separate small window that you need to add in, which usually adds, probably at least a week to most things for your planting time. So hopefully that was helpful. So the final few things I have in this bed here are some snap peas, which are a trellising type. They're doing okay. I actually planted these, transplanted them here. I started them indoors, transplanted them with actually only 2 days of being hardened off because they were massive. So they definitely were slow to acclimate, but now they look like they're rebounding. I've got some pretty nice growth happening at the top. No blooms yet, but really pleased with those. Peas really struggle in warm weather. So the fact that we've had so many late 80+ degree days has definitely slowed their growth. I have another zinnia here. This is another scabiosa zinnia. You remember the buttercream kind of colored ones from the front. These are a completely different texture in this mix, but just as gorgeous. And so that completes this bed. And as we come along to my final bed here, I have a lot growing in here, but this is my original marigold that I planted in the spring. And you can see just how massive it has gotten. The blooms are so prolific and so heavy that the branches have actually started to fall over and separate from the middle. So I'm probably going to pull this out soon. But again, this is just covered, goes all the way down to the ground. It is huge. It's gotta be probably 5 feet across both ways. And this is just one plant. And I've actually already cut a branch off here that fell and broke. But I love these zinnias. I don't even think, or I'm sorry, not zinnias, marigolds. They're not even any type of special marigold. I think I got them from Ace Hardware 2 years ago, and they just are amazing. But again, as full as this is, you can just see how many blooms are still waiting to come out. It is super prolific and adds so much color to the garden, and the pollinators love it. So then in this bed, I have another round of snap peas over here on this side of the trellis. I have another cabbage. This one actually looks like it's doing the best, surprisingly. Well, not surprising, but I'll tell you about that in a second. I have 2 more broccolis that are a late succession. Oh, I think I forgot to mention that. I do have one tiny little broccoli in that one. Not important, but one over there. 2 later successions of broccoli here, and then 5 broccolis here, which are doing pretty well. This one's doing better than all the other ones, but the other ones I think will catch up. I have 2 really sad looking cauliflowers, which I don't think are going to do much. And then finally over here, I've got another succession of radish. And I tried to plant some more cilantro along the side here, which again, common problem based on my rodents. I got very spotty germination. This cabbage is actually, as I said, looking the best, and I think that has to do with the way the sun is crossing my garden right now. And this bed seems to be having the most vigorous growth compared to some of my other ones. So not only do plants need the right conditions in terms of temperature, soil mix, all of that, but right, sunlight plays a huge part in how your crops are going to grow. And so for me, the way the sun hits my garden is going to impact and change where I can plant certain things. Things like leafy greens, don't need as much sun. So the rule of thumb is if you grow it for the root or the fruit, so something like a beet or a tomato in the summer, you need full sun, which is usually at least 6 hours a day. If you grow it 6 to 8 hours a day. If you grow it for the leaf, so think lettuces, then, or your herbs, they can usually handle part shade, so they don't need as much sun. So if you're not familiar with how your sun changes in your garden, that would be one of the things I would highly encourage you to document a little bit of. You can start now, even though it's later in the season, and start making your notes for next year. You'll just be that much more successful. So for me, the way my sun is, so this way in front of me is east, this way is west. So the sun moves across my garden this way. However, in the spring and summer, the sun tends to be a little bit more on this side, so a little bit more north, and I get pretty much full sun in the entire garden from spring to summer. But in the fall, as the sun starts to move left in the sky, it will start to come over this way. And my neighbor's hedge of bushes casts a lot of shade on these 3 beds here in the afternoon. So this front one here with the cabbage that was doing the best, the sun peeks through. I've got an opening in the back corner of my yard, and then my neighbor's missing some bushes here, so I'm able to get full sun in this bed. This bed isn't terrible. My lettuce bed, because I also have a tree back here that as the sun goes down will cast shadow, gets the least amount of sun. So that's why I plant my leafy greens there in the fall. In the spring, they may move to a different area of the garden, but that's what I think about when I'm planting my crops throughout my garden. And again, my advice to you would be, if you have never really thought about sun and how it hits your garden in your growing space, start to take notice, start to take a little bit of notes down. Again, if it's later in the season for you, that's okay. You can get your fall sun exposure nailed down now, and then you can start looking at that spring and summer exposure next year. As always, guys, I want to say a huge thank you for watching my video, following along with me. I hope you not only enjoyed seeing how my garden is doing this fall, but also that you learned a few things and are taking a couple tips and tricks back that you can implement in your own garden to make it even more successful in the weeks, months, and years ahead. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye, everyone.